What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you again. Isn't it just awesome that in a span of about 5 minutes last night, I go from looking like I'm probably actually going to have a winning year to clinching a losing year. Yesterday was fucking bullshit. It was one of the worst days that I've ever had. I get eliminated from the third place game in fantasy, although that was probably going to happen anyway. I did terribly in Pigskin Pick'em again. And it's like I can't even get any of these NFL games right at this point. It's insane, the downslide that I've had, because I was awesome through the first 12 weeks or so of that. And then usually if you hit a little lull in October and then everything goes really well in the final weeks, that was not what happened at all. And of course, one of those picks was my last bet in the Sunday night game. I mean, we could talk about this yesterday. It didn't start out well with Wright State not getting there, not even close. And Toronto Raptors also not even close. Totally ridiculous. But then it looked like I was potentially going to win all four other bets. The Detroit Red Wings, nice, easy win there. So I'm sitting at 1-2. We get late into the night. I'm like, okay, San Antonio Spurs, they covered. I mean, they were looking pretty good. They were winning in the fourth quarter, I'm pretty sure. So they were looking like they might actually pull out the outright upset and hit on the money line too, which would have been pretty nice. But I mean, if they're going to cover, I mean, I'll still take the cover, even though I want the money line. That would have helped a little bit as well. So it's looking like, all right, the Spurs are going to cover, which they did. They played a pretty good game, close game. And then it's looking like I'm going to win the other bets that are going on too. The Philadelphia Flyers, they were winning their game, I think 4-2 late in the second period. They were still winning 4-3, several minutes into the third period. I think with 7 minutes left in the game or something, I think they were still winning 4-3. And then what happens? Oh yeah, they wind up blowing the whole thing and they lose in regulation. You have an underdog like I did with the Philadelphia Flyers. And by the way, that line went further down. So I actually had a better number than where it closed. You have an underdog like that and they're winning by 2 goals that late in the game. They're still winning with 7 minutes left in the game. You know you're on the right side of that. And they still wind up losing. They wound up giving up 3 straight goals, including 2 in the final couple minutes of the game or several minutes of the game, basically to lose the game. Absolutely ridiculous. And then we know the NFL game was even more ridiculous, even though I believe the Redskins did outgain the Falcons. The Falcons, they were winning that game by 10 midway through the game. I'm not even sure there was any point before they fell behind in the fourth quarter. I think they might have been winning or at least covering for the entire span of the game up until then. They give up a touchdown, and then, of course, they're losing by a touchdown. And then Michael Penix Jr., he's not that bad, man. He led them on that final drive. There was one really bad call, by the way, on that 3rd and 11 play where he tried to throw the ball to Pitts. Whoever the Washington defender was there, had his back to the throw, and he was grabbing Pitts' collar. He was yanking him by the neck, basically. And that's not pass interference. Seriously, no call. It's just incomplete, and it's 4th and 11. And then Penix was able to hit Drake London for a huge first down anyway. Then they wind up getting down to the 5-yard line. I don't know if you saw this play, but then they went to a wildcat formation just to try to fuck with Washington's defense. Washington's defense sucks so bad, you don't even need to do that. And the snap goes through Bijan Robinson's hands, basically. I don't know if it was his fault or if it was the snapper's fault. And they wind up losing 25 yards on it. They at least recovered it. So now it's 2nd and goal from the 27-yard line. It's are you serious? And then they still wound up getting a touchdown on 4th down. Penix threading the needle. A great throw from Penix on that touchdown. He could be the real deal, man. I mean, that was an interesting matchup. Both quarterbacks looked pretty good in that game last night. And then, of course, it's tied. So what am I saying? I'm saying go for 2. I absolutely think, dude, Raheem Morris is a terrible coach. Terrible fucking coach. Which I'm going to get into that in a second too, but I got to get to today's games too. I have a lot to talk about. I'm ranting, baby. I want to get this show done too, though, in at least under an hour, but we'll see. I mean, think about it. You're on the road. I know that you need to win the game, because you're battling for your division or whatever. But if you let this game go into overtime, which is what happened, comes down to a coin flip and you don't win that coin flip, you're probably going to lose the game. Okay. So you're on the road. I think, and like Penix has been awesome on fourth down there. He's been really good on those clutch throws there. I mean, I think that they probably had a little bit above a 50% chance to make that 2-point conversion there, of course. And then here's the thing. After that touchdown, Atlanta got the ball back anyway because they still had 2 timeouts left. So why wouldn't you go for 2? I mean, of course, you might think that you're not going to get the ball back again, but they still had 2 timeouts left. So there's still that possibility you're going to get the ball back again, and then you can try to get a field goal, which, by the way, is what they wound up trying to do to try to win the game anyway. So who knows? But if they make the 2-point conversion, they're probably going to win the game right there because of that. So I think you're on the road. You take that shot. And Washington's defense is not good. Take the shot, man. Let Penix try to do it. 2-point conversion time. You have Pitts and Drake London there. I mean, they're really good red zone targets. I mean, what are you doing? They should have gone for 2 there, but they didn't do it. They tied the game. Then they did get the ball back. They stopped Washington. They got the ball back. The punt, by the way, was an excellent punt. I mean, Washington was kicking from like inside their own 20, I'm pretty sure, something close to that. I was thinking, oh man, Atlanta's going to get the ball like pretty close to midfield. The punt went all the way back, like inside the 10, and Atlanta only got it out to like the 19. Crazy. But then Penix made a couple of throws again. But here's what happened. Raheem Morris, he is their coach, right? Atlanta. I believe that's who it is. He's terrible, dude. So at the end of the first half, he blew an opportunity by not using timeouts. He left a timeout unused on the board, didn't use a timeout when he could have used a timeout to try to set up something, I believe, to try to get a field goal. And then what does he do? Oh, yeah, he doesn't learn from his mistake, and he does the same thing on this final drive here. Penix completed one long pass down the right side. He didn't get out of bounds. At that point, there's still like 30 seconds left in the game. You have 2 timeouts left. When are you going to use both of those timeouts? You have to run. Like, it was a long completion. It was a completion of like 30-something yards close to midfield. You got to run up. At the very least, you have to run up and spike the ball, man. But, I mean, you should call a timeout immediately once he goes down. Call the timeout. Save the time there. He doesn't call the timeout. And then they don't spike the ball, and they run another play. And I think it was an incompletion. I don't remember. But by the time all of that is over, they're already down to like maybe 10 seconds left or something like that. It's ridiculous, dude. He could have saved them 20-something seconds, which really matters when you're trying to get completions and get into field goal range. It's ridiculous. And then they still got into field goal range because of a pass interference call, which, I don't know, maybe slightly questionable call. I don't know. I think it was probably the right call, but maybe it's a situation where you let it go. Actually, no, it should have been illegal contact, to be honest, is what it should have been, because I'm remembering it now in my mind. The defender was probably hitting the receiver beyond 5 yards there. Like, you can't really do that, but they wound up calling it pass interference. I'm happy because I'm like, all right, the refs are going to give me the field goal try here. It was a long field goal attempt, though, 54, and with Riley Patterson, is that his name? I forget. The kicker for Atlanta. I think he's a pretty young kicker, so I don't even know if he's kicked a field goal that long before. And I'm thinking, man, he kicked it, and the aim was right on, man. I was thinking it was gonna be good, but it was short. I'm like, oh my god, it looked like it was gonna be good. So then it goes into overtime, and you're fucked basically. And dude, if you have a +4 underdog, and they're almost within the spread the entire time, they're winning the game by 10 in the second half. And then, or I think it was 10 in the second half, maybe 7 and whatever it was. They're winning by 10 in the second quarter at least. And then they send the game into overtime. You should get that right. The overtime rules are absolute bullshit, dude. If you still allow one team to just end the overtime game without the other team even getting possession. NFL overtime is still bullshit. It has not been fixed. It is horrible. And you have a situation with 2 pretty good offenses, and it was, that in the game like that, it was all going to come down to that coin flip. And as soon as I saw Atlanta lose the coin flip, I turned the fucking game off. I'm like, it's over. They're going to lose, and they're not going to cover. I am so fucking pissed about that. And they did hold them to 1 third down play on that drive, I think, but it was a short 3rd down, so they couldn't stop them on that. You knew the game was going to be over, dude. And they wound up losing by 6 in overtime because the incentives in overtime are so fucked that the first team that gets the ball is incentivized to get a touchdown to win the game. There's no way I should have lost that bet on the Atlanta +4. I am livid about that. And basically, in a span of 5 minutes, I wound up losing the Philadelphia Flyers and the Atlanta Falcons. Both of those looked like they were going to go my way, and I was going to have another winning day. I was going to be 4-2 instead of 2-4, and that was actually going to be the difference between a winning and losing year, because I'm right around the break-even point. And now with 2 days left, I have no fucking chance unless I get like almost every bet right now. And by the way, all right, I have 5 bets today. You think I'm going to go 5-0 today? No, I'm not going to. Okay, thanks, Scott. I mean, this is an orange t-shirt. Yeah, I know. I mean, I do have a flabby chest. What are you talking about? But this orange t-shirt, this looks like my, yeah, I mean, you're saying my orange t-shirt is like a skin color. Yeah, it looks like my skin. Dude, I just woke up. I just rolled out of bed and I start doing this. I'm off today. This is the shirt that I slept in. I don't really give a shit. All right, let's take a look at today, man. I got 2 college basketball plays. I don't even think I love these plays, man, but I'm going to look at the college basketball slate. We got some interesting games here to some extent. I mean, I will say that Columbia-Rutgers, I mean, this is a game that's a little bit interesting to me because this line just looks kind of insane to me. I mean, you got a Rutgers team that's 7-5, although they're undefeated at home, 6-0. I mean, they're a Big Ten team. We know they're probably better than any Ivy team. Columbia is 11-1, though. Rutgers 7-5. And Rutgers is laying 11.5 points in this game. So, I mean, it's one of those situations where the records don't really indicate what's actually going on. If you look at KenPom, he has Columbia as the weakest schedule in all of Division I basketball right now. He has them ranked 364th out of 364 in strength of schedule. So that is not a good indicator for Columbia, even though I kind of like the fact that a different Ivy team is like off to a really nice start, which Columbia is. And they do have 1 win over Villanova. So just the fact that they played Villanova, I don't see how they actually have the weakest schedule in all of D1. But according to KenPom, that is the case. But I'm also not going to come in and lay 11.5 with Rutgers, man. I mean, Rutgers, they actually play a fast tempo according to KenPom, but I mean, that doesn't even really make sense to me because Rutgers seems to play all these ugly, low-scoring games, and you're going to ask them to lay double digits in this game. I'm not going to do it. I mean, it'll be an interesting game, probably. I mean, I kind of like seeing Columbia being a different team, like I said, being atop the Ivy. I don't know if it's going to last, but I mean, if I was going to actually play this game, I guess I would have to lean to laying the points with Rutgers, though, just because it looks so difficult to do. Rutgers is coming off kind of an ugly loss to Princeton. In a game they were probably favored, I assume, but Rutgers was coming off that big New Jersey battle against Seton Hall. So Rutgers went from being like a kind of a sibling, it was a like kind of an even sibling rivalry against Seton Hall, and they'd beaten Penn State the game before that. And then coming off of that, it was, so they won a Big Ten matchup there. And then coming off the like equal sibling rivalry, they had to step down and play a little brother in Princeton, who's also a New Jersey team, and Princeton beat them. So Rutgers, I mean, if anything, you could say they're also in a bounce back spot here, whereas Columbia, I mean, they went into this holiday break. I always talk about these breaks, man. When you go into a long break on a bad note like Rutgers did, you tend to use that break to try to fix some things, even though I know they have the holidays in there and whatever as well. But you tend to come out of that break more focused, whereas if you're Columbia, you went into the break on a nice roll. That break can be more of a momentum stopper to you, even though Columbia, they get to play a Big Ten team. So I do think they'll still show up and try to play in this game. So again, I'm not going to play it, but I would slightly lean to Rutgers here, but they are down from 11.5 to 11. So it looks like early money may actually be coming in on the Columbia side. And then as far as Princeton is concerned, I would probably only look to go against Princeton in this game because they pulled off that upset of Rutgers. They played a couple of New Jersey opponents, one a littler brother against Monmouth, and almost lost the game. And then they turned around and they upset Rutgers, which, Rutgers was a 6.5 point favorite. So they weren't even that big a favorite. So the odds makers, by the way, are still telling you Princeton is actually still like 5 points better than Columbia is, because Columbia is now an 11.5 point underdog, whereas at Rutgers, whereas Princeton was only 5.5, so, or 6.5, whatever it was. But Princeton pulled off that upset, big win over a bigger brother, and that's how they went into the break. So they could come out of this break a little bit unfocused. And we're talking about Akron in basketball here, not in football. So Akron, their basketball program is a lot better than their football program. They're 0-2 on the road so far, so that doesn't inspire that much confidence, but it was a loss at St. Mary's. I mean, St. Mary's is very good, so they're probably not going to win that game going out to the Pacific Coast. And then Arkansas State is actually not that bad a team either, so that 0-2, I don't care that much about it. I would lean to Akron in this game. Princeton is up from 5 to 5.5, though. And it looks like some of the cash is coming in on their side, even though they are also public. 76% of the tickets, 86% of the cash. Will, thank you. Yeah, I mean, everybody likes my moves, man. So we'll see what happens with that game there. Not one of my plays. My plays are way worse than this, man. They're more dangerous. The first one is in this game, Cincinnati having to go to Kansas State. I'm at least taking 2 home underdogs here. Kansas State plus 4.5 is going to be this play. And I know Kansas State is not the better team here. I mean, the odds makers are telling you Cincinnati is the better team. Kansas State has a really ugly record, but this is just a situational play for me, man. And this is Cincinnati. They're now in the Big 12. I don't know. Is this their first year in the Big 12 or is it their second year? Actually, I probably should have checked that out. No, it's their second year. So I was going to say they're not really used to playing at Kansas State, which I think that actually is still the case. Last year, even though last year was their first year in the Big 12, and you usually play like pretty much every team, but it looks like they didn't actually play at Kansas State, at Manhattan, Kansas. So it looks like this is a pretty unfamiliar venue for Cincinnati, man. So that's one thing here. That's one issue for Cincinnati. But Cincinnati, they went into that break on a roll, man. I mean, they beat Xavier, they beat Dayton, a couple of nice big wins, then they clobbered Grambling. I mean, Grambling, they're a SWAC team. I mean, what do you want to say? Cincinnati's obviously the better team, although Grambling actually has been a decent program for a SWAC team, at least recently. Now Cincinnati they have to go on the road coming out of this break. And like I said, when you go into that break hot, it can be a big time momentum stopper, man. And Cincinnati's got this game at Kansas State, but then up next, they do have Arizona. And I know Arizona hasn't been playing that well this year, but I think that's still a bigger game. And then Baylor and Kansas, I think they're going to consider all of those games to be bigger than this Kansas State game, where Kansas State really has not been playing well. They're really a down program this year. So I think it's possible Cincinnati kind of overlooks Kansas State in a spot like this. Kansas State, on the other hand, they went into the break basically as bad as you could. They lost 3 straight games, but against St. John's, I mean, St. John's is a pretty good team. They came off of that and they couldn't win against Drake in a game that was a closely lined game. I mean, Drake is pretty good, so I'm not going to knock Kansas State too much for that. And then Kansas State had a really awful performance at Wichita, where Wichita is also a pretty good team this year, man. And Wichita still considers themselves to be an in-state little brother to Kansas State. So I think Wichita really, really got up for that game. And it was a close line, too, where I think the line was close to a pick 'em in that game. But Kansas State went into the break on that. And now this is going to be their Big 12 home opener. So I expect the crowd's going to be like coming in for this game. It's a night game. The crowd's going to be a little bit crazy. They're going to be a little bit wild. They get to host a ranked team here to open Big 12 play. I think you're going to get a focused Kansas State team here, man, the way they went into the break here. Whereas Cincinnati, I think they could lose a little bit of focus and lose some of their momentum here. So I'm going to play Kansas State. I mean, I don't think there's like a huge tempo discrepancy or anything like that here. We know that Kansas State is a significantly worse team, though, but the odds makers are telling you that. The line's already moving towards Kansas State, though. It's down from, well, it was 5.5, but with reduced juice. So really it was like kind of around 5 down to 4. Not a huge difference yet, but I would try to come in and grab the best number that you can if you're going to play Kansas State. 58% of tickets are actually on Kansas State, but way more of the cash at 84%. I mean, it would kind of surprise me. This is still moving all over the place. 60% now and 86% tickets versus cash. I think the money is coming in on the Kansas State side, though, and it would surprise me if the public wasn't on the Cincinnati side. I mean, Cincinnati has what, like 1 loss this year, and they're ranked in the top 20, whereas Kansas State has an almost 500 record, and they're not ranked. So I don't think the public is going to be like jumping out of their seats to play Kansas State, even on an underdog price here. If it's a very small underdog price, but I'm going to do it. Give me Kansas State in that one, plus 4.5. And then what other games do we have that are of interest? I mean, I know we have some other games between like Big 12 rivals, kind of games between like conference teams. I guess there are two Big 12 matchups. Houston at Oklahoma State, but Houston's a double-digit road favorite here. So, I mean, Houston, I actually think is underrated now. So I would not want to try to jump in and take the points with Oklahoma State in that one. I mean, Houston, they lost some games to some good teams early on, and they're ranked down at 15. But I still think Houston is probably one of the best 5 teams in the country. Even though Houston plays really, really slow, though. So asking them to cover as a double-digit road favorite is a little bit of an ask, but they are a significantly better team than Oklahoma State. So I won't play the game, but Oklahoma State is a shockingly public home underdog here. And you know what I say about public dogs, man. And if it's a public home dog, that's really telling you something. So I would only look to laying the points with Houston in that one, even though it looks a little bit dangerous to do so. That's the way that I would lean in that one, regardless of any like scheduling spot there. I mean, Houston, they did go into the break with a bunch of wins, but they beat a bunch of cupcakes. I think starting Big 12 play, I think is going to be a big game for them, but it is their first true road game. So, I mean, who knows if they'll have a little bit of difficulty here, but Oklahoma State, they're 8-3 record. I mean, I think it's a little bit misleading. I mean, they really haven't played anybody. I mean, Seton Hall's way down this year. Miami's way down as well. Those teams are not very good. The best team they've played was Oklahoma, and they lost pretty badly to Oklahoma. So, I mean, I don't have any trust in this Oklahoma State team, and they went into the break on a couple of wins as well. So, no real edge one way or the other as far as like the momentum being stopped. And then you got TCU is at Arizona, and Arizona's laying a bunch of points. They're up from 12.5 to 14.5. Looks like 57% of tickets on them, but 70% of the cash coming in on TCU. So it looks like maybe the cash percentage is coming in on TCU. I don't know if I really agree with that or buy that, because Arizona has the worst record of the two right now. They've really not looked very good to start the season. So the public, to me, looks like they might come in and look at these two teams' records and think, holy crap, TCU is getting a lot of points here in this conference matchup, and want to actually take the points with TCU here. So I don't know how to read this game, to be honest. TCU, I mean, they went into the break on a couple of wins, a huge blowout win over Montana State, who's not even bad for like a Big Sky team. So that was a pretty nice win for them. They've only had one true road game so far, and they lost to Michigan, but Michigan is definitely good this year. But now another true road game. It's not going to be easy for them in Arizona. I mean, they faced a much more difficult schedule, man. I mean, they faced Wisconsin, Duke, West Virginia, Oklahoma, UCLA. I mean, it's not even close as far as the strength of schedule here. Samford's not even bad, and they blew them out. Davidson's not even really that bad either. So Arizona has faced a way, way more difficult schedule than TCU. So in this game, I would trust Arizona more. I mean, both teams went into the break kind of on a similar note with 2 wins, and then like one of them being a blowout against a cupcake. So I actually leaned to the Arizona side. And I actually skipped my handicapping on Bryant and Grand Canyon. So let me look at this game real quick. Bryant went into the break on a bunch of losses in a row. Grand Canyon went on a bunch of wins. I'm not going to play this game, but I don't know. The situational angle in Bryant Grand Canyon would make me look towards the Bryant side, I guess, whichever team lost a bunch of games in a row. But Grand Canyon is the better team, laying a bunch of points. They're up from 12 to 12.5. I'm not going to play that game. And then the next game up is my other game that I'm playing. I'm going to take the points with Colorado. Colorado plus 10. And this is the reverse of a matchup that I played already. These teams have played once already in a neutral site game in one of those early season tournaments. So weird that this is already a repeat matchup, even though this is a now Big 12 matchup. So these teams have already played once on a neutral site. Now they're playing at Colorado. So one thing that might make this a little bit difficult for Iowa State is that they're probably not used to playing at Colorado, because Colorado is new to the Big 12. They were in the Pac-12 last year. So Iowa State's not really that used to going into a spot like this, into elevation, even though, yes, Iowa State is the way better team. And I played Iowa State the last time these teams played. So I'm flipping the script on myself here. I played this game. Iowa State blew Colorado out of the building in the Maui Invitational over in Hawaii. But why did I play Iowa State in this game, other than the fact that Iowa State's obviously the better team? Well, Colorado, they were coming off upsetting UConn, man. I mean, Colorado beat the returning champs. They'd beaten UConn. So Colorado, I thought, was in a major letdown spot, and I thought they weren't going to be able to put in an effort 2 games in a row. But now I think the script has flipped a little bit here, where now it's going to be Colorado is the team that now has the adjustments to make, man. Because when you've faced a team already, the team that won easily, like Iowa State, you won that game easily. So what adjustments do you have to make? You're going to think it's going to be easy. You're going to be able to beat this team easy again. Whereas Colorado, they know they didn't play well in this game, and they were in a bad spot in this game too. So Colorado's going to have the adjustments to make. The line is about where it should be, I think, because neutral site Iowa was up to a 13.5 point favorite. I think I laid 11.5 in that game, and now it's 10 on the road at Colorado. So, I mean, that's about accurate. If you think the 13.5 was accurate in this game, the line should be about 3 points or so different, I would say, going from a neutral to Colorado. If you give Colorado about 3 for home court, which I think is about right in college basketball. When you look at this game, I mean, yes, Iowa State dominated them, but Colorado really lost the turnover battle badly, which they'll probably be able to clean that up a little bit at home. Usually the home team doesn't turn the ball over as much. And you're looking at Iowa State shot 60.3% from the field and 44% from 3, although Colorado shot 42.1% from 3. So they both shot well from 3, but Iowa State shot an outlier high percentage from the field, and that one's 60.3%. Colorado was lower from the field than they were from 3-point range, 41.8%. I don't expect those numbers to be very sustainable. I think those field goal percentages are going to kind of move back to the norm a little bit as well. So I like that aspect of it. I think you might see a little bit of a regression here, a progression, if you're talking about Colorado, back to the mean a little bit. Iowa State went into the break on a huge win streak, man. I mean, they've only lost 1 game all season, and it was a 2-point loss to Auburn. So, yeah, Iowa State's good. They faced a pretty difficult schedule. They beat Dayton, Marquette, Iowa. I mean, they've beaten some pretty decent teams. Yeah, I know. And the Iowa game was the one road game that they had, but still, this is an unfamiliar road environment. They're much more familiar with playing at Iowa than they are with playing at Colorado. They went into the break on a huge win streak, so they might have their momentum stopped a little bit from having that huge break after being on a roll like that. You don't really want to stop playing basketball when you're on a roll. And then up next in a few days, they have Baylor, which they might consider to be a much bigger game. So a Colorado team they already beat on a neutral. I think they might overlook Colorado a little bit. Baylor is a huge, huge game for them, man. Baylor, I mean, still one of the staples of this conference, one of the better teams in the conference. So I think it could be a little bit of a look-ahead spot and a spot where Iowa State's going to be coming in with a little bit less momentum. So give me Colorado for that reason as well. I mean, in this game, like I said with Kansas State, we know we're playing on a home underdog that is the lesser of the two teams. We know this. I don't even think Colorado's very good. I don't think they're even as good as their 9-2 record indicates. I just like the spot. So as far as the records are, it almost looks like maybe the line almost looks too high to take Iowa State in some respects because they're only 1 game better than Colorado. But then you look at the rankings, and it's like, well, if Iowa State's ranked 3rd in the country versus an unranked team, I think the public is going to see that ranking and think, okay, well, Iowa State's the way better team because the rankings makers are telling you that. So, and they are. They're actually a significantly better team, but the spot puts me on Colorado here, plus the 10 points. You might only be able to get 9.5 now, but I think that's fine as well. Colorado, they went into the break on a win streak as well. So it could be a momentum stopper for both teams, but this is their first home game as a member of the Big 12, man. They're hosting Iowa State, a team that blew their doors off the last time I played them. I think they're going to be focused for this game, man. I think they're going to show up. I think their crowd is going to be crazy for this one. They're going to show up. It's a night game again, conference home opener. I think it's going to be a big deal for Colorado as a member of their new conference. They have the familiarity behind them as well. So I like that aspect of it too. As far as like the tempo, like the pace that these teams like to play at, there's not a huge difference between the two. So give me Colorado in that game, man, plus all these points. And then let's see here. I'm going to go back to the schedule. Oh, Will, what's up, man? Thank you, sir. And yeah, I'll talk about a couple other games real quick here. We have a couple other decent looking games here. I mean, I will say Mississippi State, they're coming off a game where they beat Memphis. So you could argue they're in kind of a letdown spot here, but they're facing Bethune-Cookman, man. I mean, Mississippi State's the way better team. So even though you might say that Mississippi State, they're coming off a big win over Memphis, they got SEC play up next. I mean, it's such a mismatch that I don't even know if I would want to even attempt to take the points there. And then you got Nebraska. Nebraska's coming home from winning the Diamond Head Classic in Hawaii, and then they had a break after that. So I think Nebraska is actually in a pretty bad spot here, and they face Southern University here, which I made a mistake, by the way, on one of my earlier shows from about a month ago. I thought Southern was in Texas. They're actually in Louisiana, so my mistake. I think they're in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Baton Rouge. So my mistake on that one. I get some of these teams mixed up, man, but whatever. So I think I did know that at one point, but yeah, Nebraska, I mean, they're coming off that nice win in Hawaii in that tournament. Now they get a SWAC team, and then up next they face their first Big Ten opponent, which is a ranked UCLA team who's now in the Big Ten. So could be a look-at spot as well. It's basically a sandwich spot for Nebraska here, man. So it's a bad spot for them, but they're up from 19.5 to 22. They're way better than Southern. So am I jumping out of my seat to try to come in and take the points with Southern? No, I am not. I will just stay away. And then we do have a Gonzaga. They're off a big win over UCLA. A loss to UCLA. Man, Gonzaga, they're losing to all the better teams they're playing, man. Maybe Gonzaga's not that good this year. I thought they were still one of the best teams, but they're having trouble against some of the best teams some of the best teams out there. So I don't know. Gonzaga, now that off of that big game against UCLA, close loss, they have to go to Pepperdine. I don't know. I mean, it's the start of conference play, though, and they're used to playing there. So I think there's still it's still such a mismatch. They're still way better than Pepperdine. They're laying 20.5 points here. So even if it is a little bit of a hangover spot, I mean, I don't trust Pepperdine to even be able to stay within that number. So I'm not going to do that. And then Seattle, I played Seattle against Washington. That was a huge in-state and in-city rivalry game. And they pulled off the upset over Washington. Huge win. And then they went to the break on that. So I think they are in a letdown spot here against Nichols. So I would potentially look to take Nichols in this game. But Nichols, yeah, I mean, they went into the break on a loss as well, facing Gonzaga, getting blown out, even though that was a big game. They lost pretty badly. Now Nichols playing in the state of Washington yet again, going to Seattle. The problem that I have with this is that Seattle, I mean, they're 5-8, yet they're laying 8.5 against a 7-5 team. So the odds makers are telling you Seattle is actually the way better team here. They've just faced a way more difficult schedule than Nichols, and they have. And if you look at KenPom's luck index, Nichols is one of the luckiest teams in the country so far. They faced a weaker schedule than Seattle has. So I mean, I think that's what's going on there. So I would not trust taking the points with Nichols there, but it does look like a bad spot for Seattle, though, because the last game they played was a huge upset win that I won on against the University of Washington. So I still would lean to the Nichols side, but I just can't do it. And the line hasn't moved, really. It's just kind of sitting at 8.5 with juice. And then Santa Clara and San Francisco, by the way, I would not overlook this game as far as if you like good basketball. I think this game's going to be a good game, man. Santa Clara and San Francisco, these are both under the radar good teams in the WCC. With Gonzaga kind of faltering right now. I mean, this conference looks like it's a little bit more wide open than you'd think it would be, too. So San Francisco's laying 4.5 at home. So odds makers are telling you they're the slightly better team, but not by a whole lot. This could be an interesting game, man. Both teams are going to show up for that game, I would have to imagine. I don't know how it's going to go, but it's an interesting game, man. When both teams are going to show up, you do kind of want to look to the better team, which is San Fran. Here, they're up from 4-5, 83% of tickets, 92% of the cash, but they're public, and it looks like the money is actually coming in on them. So maybe they are on the right side, but man, I mean, I think it could be an interesting game, could be a good game. Let's go over to NHL here. We only have 3 games today. The Rangers are at Florida. Man, the Rangers have just been awful. I mean, I played on the Rangers coming out of their holiday break. I thought they were going to bounce back, and Shesterkin was awful again. I don't know what to say about this Rangers team. They're just, I mean, they don't have much different personnel from last year, and they're just completely falling apart. I don't know what to expect out of them. So on the one hand, you expect, well, they're going to show up. They're going to try really hard to try to win a game here. They've been playing so bad, and they're playing against the returning champs. Yeah, that's true. But Florida's coming off an ugly loss too. They've lost 2 straight games and gotten shut out in both of them, 4-0 against Tampa and Montreal. So they're going to show up in this game too, man. So I would have to look to the Florida side in this one if I was going to play it, even though they will be public. They're up from -182 to -195, 91% of tickets, 95% of the cash. So Florida is very public here, but I would not want to go against Florida with the Rangers just playing like complete ass, and Florida in a spot where I think they're really going to be hungry to show up after a couple of real ugly losses. So that's the way that I would look in that one. The Ducks in the Rose Bowl. Yeah, I like Ohio State in that game. I want to talk about that. When is that game? That game is in 2 days. I'll be talking about all the playoff games, man. I have not played the game, which I like Ohio State, though. And Ohio State was at 1 when it opened, and now I think they're at 2, 2.5. So it looks like the actual professional money is on Ohio State as well. I like Ohio State to get the revenge in that game. If the line drops a little bit back down towards like 1, 1.5, I might jump in on Ohio State in that one. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, I like Ohio State in that game. I think they're the better team over Oregon. So, and I think the line is actually very short in that game. So I might come in and play Ohio State anyway. Ohio State was -3 at Oregon during the season, dude. Are you going to knock Ohio State down for losing that game by 1 with some like bad clock management when they could have gotten into field goal range? They definitely could have won that game. Oregon has not really shown that their defense is really as good as Ohio State's is. Their defense is at least susceptible to better offenses, and Ohio State is a better offense than most in the country. So, yes, I like Ohio State in that game. That would be my opinion there. I think if Ohio State was laying 3 on the road there, in a neutral site, they should be laying like almost close to 6 points there, although 3 may have been a little bit high, but still, I mean, it looks like 4, 5 maybe would be a fair line in this game, and they're laying below a field goal. So, yeah, it looks like the only value there, oops, I still had Colorado up. The only value in that one is on Ohio State, man. That would be my opinion. It might be the best play this week, actually, the playoff games. So, yes, I do like that side. And I think Ohio State is still getting docked for that loss to Michigan. But that was a game where, like I said, Ohio State was already in the playoffs. I think that game meant way more to Michigan than it did to Ohio State. So that's just the way that it is. And I played Ohio State against Tennessee, and they just wrecked Tennessee. And even with that wrecking of Tennessee, it seems like they're still undervalued in the line. So the public just likes Oregon, man. I mean, they haven't lost yet. So Nashville is at Winnipeg. This is just an interesting line where Winnipeg's all the way down from -160 to -134, and they are public. 86% of tickets, 74% of the cash. So some big reverse line movement headed towards Nashville, which is just kind of crazy to think about because Winnipeg has the way better record here. It's not even close record-wise. So the odds makers are continuing to tell you that Nashville is underperforming, although at some point it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you're telling me that Nashville is better than the record indicates, and I still agree with that, but they also keep losing. So, like, do I want to come in and try to play Nashville here? I don't really. I mean, Nashville, they're coming off a bad loss, so maybe it is a spot where they're going to show up focused again. I mean, they're playing Winnipeg as well, so they should probably be focused. And actually, that was a bad spot for Nashville because they were on a little bit of a roll, and they just beaten the Kings and Carolina. Huge wins there, and then they had to go out to St. Louis coming out of the break, so it was a bad spot with Winnipeg up next. Kind of a sandwich spot there, and they played real bad and gave up 7 goals. So it does look like you can explain that loss to St. Louis, and it is a bounce-back spot for Nashville here. But Winnipeg, I don't know if I want to jump in front of Winnipeg in this spot because I don't think their spot is necessarily that bad. I mean, they came out of their break and were kind of in a bad spot coming out of the break, and they still beat Ottawa. So, I mean, you're going to get a fairly rested Winnipeg team still because they just came out of the break in a bad spot. They still were focused. They do have Colorado up next tomorrow, so maybe you could argue it's a little bit of a look ahead there from Winnipeg. But, man, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to try to jump in on that one. I am going to jump in on this last game, though. You're not going to like this one, Will. I'm going to jump in on the other hockey game today, and it's going to be Utah minus 130. I'm going to lay Utah as a road favorite, and it looks like the money line is moving up on them, even though it looks like less of the cash is on them now. So I don't know if maybe some money is kind of buying back on Seattle. I don't know, but this looks like a significant move to me from minus 115 up to minus 136. I wish I got it at the better number. Utah's a little bit public, 77% of tickets, 71% of the cash on Utah. So I don't know about this cash disparity. We may see like different numbers as the market kind of shapes up there, but Utah has moved up in price. So I think there has been some money coming in on their side. I agree with it. I think it's a bad spot for Seattle. So I'm going to fade them in this spot. I don't really expect the public to be that heavy on Utah here because neither team has a good record, really. I mean, Utah does have the better record, but I mean, they're both kind of close to 500. So laying a price like that on the road, I don't expect the public to be that heavy on it. In Seattle, they were mired in a huge loss streak, so they weren't playing well. But then they came out of the break, and that was kind of a positive spot for them because they went into the break on such a bad note that means coming out of the break, you tend to be like refocused. But what did they do? They played against Vancouver on the road, and they were losing this game 4-1 in the third period. They were still losing 4-1 with 5 minutes left in the game, and they won the game. They scored 3 goals in the final 5 minutes of regulation and won in overtime. That is a massive comeback for Seattle, man. And they got out-physicaled in this game badly, 24-8 in hits. I mean, Seattle not playing physical at all. Vancouver, the way more physical team. So Seattle, they're coming off a massive effort game, like a huge, like kind of emotional win, like a max effort, dramatic comeback win. You had to put in a huge effort to win that, and they were getting beaten up physically by Vancouver, and they're coming off that game, and they're returning home from it again, although it's not a road trip return because, again, they had returned home for the holidays, so they only had – that was a one-game trip up to Vancouver, so it's not really a road trip return. But even so, I think it's a sandwich spot. I think they're in a letdown spot coming off that massive, massive effort. Now they get to face this Utah team, and who do they have next? Vancouver again, and then Edmonton, New Jersey. All teams with better records. So, man, I think it's a sandwich spot. I think it's a bad spot for Seattle. I think they're in a Vancouver sandwich, which I don't know what sandwiches they even eat in Vancouver. I don't even know if they have good food. What the hell do they eat in Vancouver? Fish? Salmon? No, thanks. Although Seattle also, they eat fish there, so probably salmon there as well. Not the greatest cuisine up there, in my opinion. Seattle, even though I am in a seafood town as well in Boston, but our seafood is better, man. We got clam chowder, New England clam chowder, and lobster, kid. It's that shit is way better than fucking salmon. So Seattle, bad spot for them, man. Utah, I think Utah's in a good spot because Utah, they're getting to go out on the road after a bad game. So they went into the break kind of bad with a couple of losses, a bad loss to Anaheim, but it wasn't a shootout, and then a close loss to Dallas. That's how they went into the break. They came out of the break, had a home game, and they got wrecked by Colorado. So I think when something like that happens, the best thing for you is to just get the hell out of there and go on the road, and then you can just focus on hockey. You don't have to listen to what the local media is saying about you, about how much you suck. So they've had a couple of days off too. So they do have one extra day rest, I think, over what Seattle has too. And they're going out on the road. And again, like I say, starting a road trip tends to be a focus spot because you want to get the road trip off on the right foot. And when you just lost really badly at home, it tends to be good to just get the hell out of there and not focus on what your home crowd is saying about you, So I think it's a focus spot for Seattle for those reasons. I think it's potentially an unfocused spot for Utah, and potentially an unfocused spot for Seattle. So give me Utah minus 130 in that one. Yeah, they do suck. I don't want them to win either because they're gay and they play in Climate Pledge Arena, which is very, very gay. Just a gay team all around, man. The Kraken. It's a stupid name too. I mean, they're like pastel colors. It's all stupid. I don't like it. Let's look at NBA now. I have 2 NBA plays. I don't know what is going on. My computer's been kind of acting up a little bit slow, but I thought it was because I had Descript open because I use that for show descriptions and whatever. Now I closed Descript, but I don't know. There's still something going on. NBA, Bulls, I think, are in a letdown spot. So the Bulls are coming off a win over the Milwaukee Bucks. So I think kind of simple, straightforward letdown spot, but I'm not going to actually come in and try to do it. They don't have a bigger game up next. They are going on the road to the Charlotte Hornets. It's down from 6.5 to 5 now. So some money looks like it is actually coming in on Charlotte. 65% of tickets, 89% of the cash coming in on Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte has a really ugly record, so nobody's really going to want anything to do with them. But they're coming off a game against Oklahoma City where, yeah, they lost by double digits, but I mean, they kind of didn't go away in this game. I mean, it's a game against a tough opponent at the very least. So I don't really want to have my money on Charlotte there. So I'll stay away from that. Clippers look like they're in a letdown, or not in a letdown spot necessarily, but in a bad spot, I guess I would say. 81% of tickets, 78% of the cash. So Clippers very public against this mess of a Pelicans team, but they're only laying 5 points on the road, and the public is all over the Clippers. It looks way too easy to take the Clippers here. Actually, it is a letdown spot because they're coming off big wins over Memphis and Golden State, but they play San Antonio tomorrow. I don't know if San Antonio is really a team that completely will draw your focus. I don't think it's a sandwich spot, but they beat Memphis and then they went to the holiday break. They came out of the break and they still beat Golden State. So I do think it is kind of like a simple letdown spot, and that's really what it comes down to. But I don't think that's strong enough for me to come in and play New Orleans, especially when New Orleans can't beat anybody, and they're coming off kind of a tough performance over Memphis. I mean, they played pretty tough against Memphis, man, and they have played 2 games already out of the Christmas break, although they've now had a couple of days off. But that game was tough against Memphis, man, and this New Orleans team has so many injuries right now. I mean, they're still without Zion Williamson. I think you're still without Brandon Ingram. I mean, I don't know what is happening with this Pelicans team, but I just don't want to deal with it, man. I mean, just they have not been playing well. Like, they haven't been dealing with these injuries well. They can't really overcome the injuries that easily. So I'm going to stay away from that as well. Denver is at Utah. Denver, I mean, I wouldn't say they're in a letdown spot. They just came off a win over Detroit, which is whatever. They got Atlanta up next. Going into elevation, I mean, obviously they're used to playing in elevation because they're Denver, but it's a spot where simply, I mean, it looks like maybe they might overlook Utah a little bit. And Utah's coming off another loss to Philadelphia, but they played pretty close against Philadelphia, and Philadelphia's become like a pretty formidable team with all their pieces back, all their injured players and suspended players have all come back. So I don't know. I don't know how to read this game, but Nuggets are down from 8.5 to 7, 69% of tickets on them, 52% of the cash on the Jazz. So it looks like the money is actually coming in on the side of the Jazz. I won't be doing that. What I will be doing, though, is laying the points with the Philadelphia 76ers. They are up from 5.5 to 6. So it looks like the money is coming in on their side. I know I'm laying a road favorite, which sometimes the spot makes sense to do that in the NBA, man, when it's a good team against a bad team. And I actually would say this is a good team against a bad team now, with the 76ers starting to play pretty well with all their pieces there, even though they looked like they were a mess for a while. 71% of tickets, 85% of the cash on the Sixers. So they are a little bit public now. I mean, the public's not going to come in and play the Portland Trailblazers, but the money, it looks like it is coming in on the Sixers as well. It looks like there may be professional agreement with the Philadelphia side on this one, and I agree with it as well. I mean, Philadelphia, they had kind of a lackluster performance in that game against Utah that I mentioned, and how could you not when you're coming off a game against Boston? They upset Boston, my Celtics, who have not been playing well. Celtics have lost, I think, 3 or 4 of their last 6 games or something, all as double-digit favorites. I don't know what the hell is going on with the Celtics. Celtics did bounce back and murder Indiana coming off of that loss to Philadelphia, and I won money on that one. So at least there was that. But Philadelphia, they were coming off a huge win as a double-digit dog on Christmas on national TV at Boston. They came out of that and had to go to Utah. You know that was a bad spot. So I almost took the points with Utah. I probably should have. I mean, Utah, they got out to a good start in that game, and they lost the game, but they still at least covered the game. I'm pretty sure they were more than a 3-point underdog. Yeah, they were 7.5-point underdog. So Utah covered the spread in that game. Sixers didn't play well, but obviously you can excuse the Sixers not playing well because it was coming off that big game against Boston. But now they're coming off a lackluster performance. They still won, which is still going to continue their momentum. They don't really have a huge game up next against Sacramento, who really has been playing badly. So I think Philadelphia, this looks to me like a focus spot, man, where they didn't play well against Utah. It's an explainable game there. Now they're going to Portland. I think they're going to be focused. And again, they got their guys back. I mean, you have the injury report here where Embiid and Drummond are both game time decisions, but I mean, to me, it looks like based on the line, probably they're going to play in this game. I don't know. And if one of them doesn't play, then maybe you wind up in an injured player theory spot for them. I mean, Maxey will play. I mean, who knows? Who knows what's going on with them, but we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully those guys are all there, but I also think this is a spot to fade Portland, man. I mean, Portland, they're really not a very good team. Even if Embiid is out for Philly, I think Philly is still the better team here, but the odds makers are telling you Philly is the way better team with their full lineup there, and I agree with that. Portland also just beat Utah, but I mean, the public, like I said, they're not going to come in on trying to take the points with Portland here, even if they do see that both teams just beat Utah in very, very close games and see that Portland's getting a bunch of points at home and Philadelphia's record still isn't good, but still Portland, the main reason to fade Portland here is they just beat Dallas. I was on that game. So again, that was an explainable result because Dallas was coming off a big win over Phoenix. I mean, they have Sacramento up next. So that was, they were coming off two big games on Christmas Day against Minnesota and then bouncing back and beating Phoenix. So I thought it was a bad spot for Dallas. I took Portland. Portland pulled off the upset, and you pull off a big upset against a team that won the conference, man. I think you're in a bad spot coming off of that. So I think Portland's in a bad spot, and I think Philadelphia is in a good spot here, where it's a type of spot where you want to play on the better team if they're actually going to show up against the worst team, where it's actually questionable what they have left in the tank. So it looks like a good spot to play Philadelphia. I'm going to do it. And Portland does have LeBron and the Lakers up next too. So it is possible Portland still overlooks Philadelphia because they've been pretty lackluster. So give me Philadelphia in that one. And then I'm not going to play on the Mavericks-Kings game. This is an interesting one where the Kings are up from 3-4, 68% of tickets, 65% of the cash on the Mavs. Public's still coming in on the Mavs, and it looks like there's actually a reverse line movement against the public, where it looks like the money is actually coming in on the Kings. But the Kings, I mean, I've played on them twice during this recent stretch, and they haven't done anything. They've lost a bunch of games in a row, and I think they've been a favorite in basically all of these games. I took them as an underdog in this game at LA, but they went off the favorite in that game too. So they've lost. I think they were a favorite in almost every one of these games. Maybe not the Denver one, but all the other games they were a favorite, and they lost all of them. So I don't know what is going on with the Sacramento team, man. They're way underperforming what their talent level is. I mean, they still have basically the same guys that they had last year. This team could score, even though their defense isn't that good, but I don't know what's going on with this team, man. And Sacramento had swept the season series of the Lakers last year, 4-0. This year, they lost all 4 games, so they blew it for me. So I don't want to have anything to do with Sacramento right now, man. Right now, man. Yeah, I mean, they're going to be focused, I guess, when it's Dallas coming into their place, but still, I mean, them being in a focus spot hasn't been enough. I mean, they've lost in focus spots all throughout the stretch, so I think they're a team that you can't really play on right now, though it wouldn't shock me if they finally won this game, but I also don't want to play against Dallas when they just lost at Portland, man. I mean, they're playing a third game in 4 days, though, and a fourth game in 6 days, and actually a fifth game in 8 days, too. So they've had a packed schedule, including a game on Christmas, so I don't really want to play on Dallas because their rest spot isn't good, but they played a bad game in their last game against Portland. So if they're going to show up, they may show up for this one, but they do have Houston and then Cleveland up next. So it is possible they actually overlook Sacramento as well. So it's not a game I want to get involved in at all, really, but I don't really want to fade Dallas when they are coming off an ugly loss. But again, it is a bad rest spot with the last 4 games in these 6 days have all been in different cities too. So it is a difficult travel and rest spot for them. But I am going to play this last game here, and oh boy, help me. Golden State Warriors plus 4.5 is what I'm going to do here. Cavs are up from 2 to 4.5. They have 51% of tickets. Of course, the public is going to come in on the Cavs here. And they already beat the Warriors in a blowout at home, which I was actually on that game. I played the Cavs against the Warriors in that first game because I thought the Cavs were actually being a little bit shortchanged in that game. But now I think the tables are turning, man. This is similar to that Colorado play that I'm making here. Warriors have 87% of the cash on them. 52% of tickets now in the Cavs. So it looks like it may be a pros versus Joes type of scenario now where, I mean, you look at these teams' records, the public is only going to come in and play the Cavs, man. And they've been really good. They have the way better record. But I think this might be a spot where they might actually overlook the Warriors, even though it is Steph Curry. I mean, the Cavs already played them once and they annihilated Golden State. And that was a spot where I played on the Cavs. I mean, the Cavs were just in a stretch where they were rolling. They were not in a spot where they weren't going to be focused. I mean, they were coming off a game against New Orleans. Who cares? They had Brooklyn up next. Who cares? And in that game, I think Golden State was actually in the worst spot, even though they were still going to be focused on Cleveland. But they were coming off the win over Boston, man, on the road. So it's like, were they really going to be able to continue an effort like that 3 straight games? I don't think so, although they did actually bounce back and beat Oklahoma City on the road after that, which is kind of surprising. So Golden State, I mean, this is a team that can compete with the best teams in the NBA, man. And in this game, they broke their loss streak. They had a 3-game loss streak. They finally broke it with a win over Phoenix. I mean, I know beating Phoenix is a pretty good win. I mean, you beat Kevin Durant and whatever, but they're going to be focused with Cleveland coming into their place, man. I think that win will serve to break their loss streak. I like the spot for Golden State here. I don't love the spot for Cleveland, obviously, because I'm playing against them, but Cleveland has scored a bunch of, they put up a bunch of high point totals. They came out of the break. They went into the Christmas break on a roll. They didn't play on Christmas, and they came out of the break, and they went into elevation into Denver, and they still beat Denver, and they put up 149 points, but they gave up 135. So their defense didn't show up well in that game at all, but the public is just going to see, well, this is Cleveland. They keep scoring a ton of points, but man, now coming out of elevation like that, they get Golden State, who hasn't really been playing that well. They do have LeBron up next, which they may still consider to be a bigger game because he's the Cleveland homeboy there. So I don't know, man. This Golden State team, I think it is actually possible to overlook them here, and it may not be the best spot. A second road game in a row now after a really nice offensive performance at the very least. I'm going to grab the points with Golden State, and I think the number is too high because, man, when Cleveland hosted Golden State and I won on that game, Cleveland was like -4.5 at home, and now they're -4.5 on the road. I think the line should be probably closer to like 2.5 in this game. So I think the line is a little bit too far. I don't know if it's taking into account any injury situation here, but it doesn't really look like there's any injury situation going on here for either team, really. It looks like we're going to get Curry is going to play in this game. I mean, Green, I think, is ready to go as well. Curry played in the last game as well. So no, reverse injured player spot here either. So yeah, Golden State, give me the points, and that is the NBA slate there. That's all of my plays, by the way. I'm not playing either football game. We do have one bowl game today. So we have a weird isolated bowl game here, Iowa at Missouri, and this is the trans-perfect Music City Bowl. The Music City Bowl is usually sponsored by some like Nashville area, like I think credit union or like some bank or some mortgage company. I forget what it is. Now it's Trans Perfect. They're a company that transes children, actually, is what they are. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe they are. I don't know. Trans Perfect is a horrible name, man. And by the way, any trans person is far from perfect. I'm going to get nuked. My sports channel is going to get nuked now for this. Now, I'm joking around, everybody. I'm kidding, but not really. But yes, I am. But terrible, terrible name. But I think Trans Perfect is some accounting software or something. I don't know. It's something to do with bank transactions. I don't know what it is exactly, but they're the sponsor of the Music City Bowl. This is in Nashville. So it's not really, there's no real like location edge for either team. This is Iowa at number 20, or not at, but Iowa versus number 19 ranked Missouri. Both of these teams actually finished the season nicely here. Iowa finished on a couple of wins. So I like looking towards teams in bowl games that finish the season strong. And Missouri, they finished the season strong as well, man. I mean, even though they started the season ranked in the top 10, so they were probably thinking maybe playoffs, and then they lost that hope, and then they still kind of had hope maybe we'll get into the like SEC championship, and then that hope went away. And at the point where they played these last 2 games, they knew that wasn't going to be, they didn't have that hope anymore, and they still showed up in these last 2 games, even though, yeah, one of them was Mississippi State, who's just awful, terrible team. But they showed up for their final home game, at least, which it was senior day. So maybe that was a little bit of a reason for them to show up, but they beat Arkansas. And we know Arkansas is not really that bad a team. So Missouri, I mean, they didn't do badly in that game. And so both of these teams like showed some heart towards the end of the season, and they didn't really like drop off at the end of the season. This line, though, Missouri's down from 3 to 2.5, 55% of the tickets on them, 68% of the cash, and the total is way low, down from 43 to now 40.5, 66% of tickets, 90% of cash on the over. I mean, Iowa a lot of times likes to play these low-scoring, ugly games, man, because they play good defense and they run the football. I mean, they've been able to score a little bit more this year, but they never really have a good passing game. At least over the last few years, they don't really. This line's now down to a straight 2.5, by the way. So to me, it looks like the public is probably coming in more on the Missouri side. I don't know about this cash percentage coming in on Missouri, but I lean to the Iowa side here in this game, man. I mean, Missouri, and both these teams are used to playing in bowls, so they're big conference teams. I don't think that getting to any bowl is really like a huge, I don't think it is a huge deal to either of these teams to be here. But if both teams kind of want to be here, which I think is the case because we don't have a whole lot of opt-outs here on the opt-out tracker. So it looks like for the most part, these teams are going to be intact. Although I'll talk about the one key player who's not playing in a minute here. But Iowa, it's the better defense with Iowa getting points. And I tend to want to look that way when that's the case. You get the better defense, the team that likes to run the football. I mean, that's more smash mouth football. It's old school. It's the way I like football to be played, man. With a low total like this, it seems like the odds makers are actually kind of telling you they expect the game to be Iowa's style of game. So I lean to taking the points with Iowa in this one. Of course, if you want to, the 3 is a lot better than the 2.5 because the 3 is the key number, obviously. Excuse me. I'm not going to actually play this game, though. I'm trying to be very selective in these college football playoff and bowl games. I've only played 3 of them, and I'm 3-0. So my college football dominance continues, man. My college football has been awesome this season. It is what it is. And my leans have been really good in these bowl games too, man. So take for that what you will, but I like Iowa in this game. I don't know if there's a whole lot else to say about this. Well, the other thing I was going to say is, well, it also looks too easy to take Missouri, right? Because they're only laying less than a field goal, and they're the ranked team. So to me, it looks like the public is going to come in on the Missouri side. And because Iowa doesn't play good offense. So the public always hates these ugly offense, these defensive teams. But being a contrarian, I like those teams, man, because it's more fundamental football. It means you have your fundamentals down, So looking at the opt-outs, so the key opt-out in this game is Luther Burden for Missouri here. He's probably their best offensive player, and he's declared for the NFL draft. He's a very good wide receiver, so he is not going to be there for this game for Missouri. So they're down their top wide receiver. How much of an impact is that going to have? Who knows? It's Burden the third, actually, but he was their leading receiver in like half of their games. But they do have other guys who have been pretty good in his stead, so I don't know if it's going to be that big a deal, but Burden will be out for this game. The other thing is you got to look at what's going on with Missouri's quarterback situation where Cook was hurt for a little while, but it does look like he's back. He's their quarterback, so you want to make sure he is back because Pine, the quarterback who filled in for him, was terrible. So Cook did come back, so to me it looks like he is going to play in this game. So they will have Cook. They will have their running backs available in this game. So this Missouri offense, they have a decently balanced offensive attack. I mean, their offense is pretty good, but I do think Iowa does have the better defense here. And we've seen the Missouri, when they've faced better defenses, they have struggled a bit. I mean, they lost to Alabama, but it is Alabama. Alabama's good. And then Texas A&M really slowed them down. Texas A&M has a very good defense. Auburn plays pretty good defense as well. And they beat Auburn. But man, I mean, that was a game where Cook went down in the game, but I think that game could have been a little bit misleading. I mean, most of Auburn's losses were misleading this year, really. And then they actually put up a lot of offense in Cook's return against South Carolina, even though South Carolina does play pretty good defense too. And they got held to 23 against Oklahoma, who does play pretty good defense too. But good defenses have slowed this offense down a little bit, and Iowa is definitely a good defense. And then the other opt-outs, we have Iowa. One of their quarterbacks, or two actually, McNamara and Rezar, are both Rezar. It sounds like another like a slur that might get my channel banned. I don't know if I'm allowed to use the R slur on here. This isn't Tower Gang at the very least. I'd like to keep my YouTube. But Iowa, I mean, their quarterback, like I said, their quarterback doesn't really matter as much. I mean, McNamara did start the season, but he hasn't played since October 19th, man. He really wasn't getting the job done anyway. So they went to Sullivan, and then they went to Stratton, and they won their last 2 games with Stratton in there. So really, they didn't miss a whole lot without McNamara. I mean, this Iowa team, they run the football, man. So who's behind center? Even though quarterback usually matters, for a team like Iowa, it doesn't matter as much, man. Because again, they run the football and they play defense. So, and again, I mean, the quarterback who was their starter at the beginning of the season, who was opting out, McNamara, he hasn't played for so long, but the fact that he's not playing in this game doesn't matter really, right? I mean, they've been playing without him for half the season, so who cares about that? So I like Iowa in that game. And now let's look at Monday Night Football before we get out of here. I'm not playing that game, by the way, but that is the way that I would lean if I was going to play it. I would take the points with Iowa, try to find the 3, but even 2.5, I actually wouldn't hate. I mean, I kind of expect Iowa to win the game. Now, Monday night, I talked about this Monday Night Football game in my NFL video. The Lions are up from 3 to 3.5. Looks like it's kind of coming back down towards the 3 range. And now the Lions are, they already were a public road favorite here. I mean, dreaded primetime public road favorite here, man. 87% of tickets, 85% of the cash on the Lions. My handicap isn't going to change too much from what I said in my NFL video, but I will point out the one thing that has kind of definitively changed, but I talked about that in my NFL video as one of the possibilities coming into this game. So the Lions are very public with less of the cash on them, so it looks way too easy to lay the points with the Lions, right? I mean, the 49ers have been a complete disaster recently. They've been a mess. The 49ers know that they're not making the playoffs now, so they're out of it. They're dead, but they might have reason to show up in this game, man, because this is Monday night against the Detroit Lions, who are probably the best team in the NFC, even though Detroit does have a lot of injuries now, which I'll mention that in a minute as well. But as far as San Francisco showing up, if they're going to show up for any of these remaining games, it's probably going to be this one, right? Monday night against Detroit. If they have anything left to play for, it's probably this game. They'll probably try to show up and do something for their fans, in their final game. But both of these teams actually have a ton of injuries, as I mentioned on my show. I mean, Detroit's down couple of their best defenders. Aiden Hutchinson wrecked his leg. He's been out since that game against Dallas, and it hasn't really slowed down Detroit that much, but eventually it seems like these injuries have to catch up to them at some point, man. And they lost Anzalone. I forget his first name, something with an A, I think. Their best linebacker, he's been out. I don't think he's back. And now they lost David Montgomery, who's the power rusher. So he's going to be out. So that running back tandem is now gone, and they have to use Gibbs as like their primary rusher, even though, yeah, he is good, but he functions really well as like a fast, like pass catching back, even though he can run with a little bit of power too. But you really want that bruiser with Montgomery there, and they don't have him either. So these injuries got to catch up to Detroit at some point. But then again, San Francisco is also really injured. I mean, they're down to a 4th string running back, Patrick Johnson Jr. So I don't even know who he is, something like that. So who even knows about that? They're without Brandon Ayuk, so they're without one of their best wide receivers. They got injuries on defense. I think Greenlaw, their best linebacker, has been out the entire season. I think they've lost some other guys as well. They lost Trent Williams at some point during the season, who's their best offensive lineman. I don't know if he's back, so he might be back. But this San Francisco, this team has been really beaten up this year, man. Just tons of injuries. Both of these teams have tons of injuries. Detroit actually has the most injuries, and San Francisco is up there with having the most as far as starters who are injured. So this is kind of an injury bowl here, but everything that I say about motivation still holds true. And then we look at Detroit's motivation, and I pointed out their motivation somewhat was going to hinge on what Minnesota and Green Bay did yesterday. And I thought Green Bay was going to win that game. Again, they almost had a 4th quarter comeback. Minnesota lets Green Bay get back into this game, man. And it didn't quite happen. But Minnesota won that game. So now the deal for Detroit is that, let me get back. I clicked on the game. All right. The issue for Detroit is the 1 seed, the battle for the 1 seed comes down to them versus Minnesota next week. So Detroit, this game actually no longer matters to Detroit. Them getting the 1 seed completely depends on their game against Minnesota. This game doesn't matter, man, because Detroit, they're right now a half game below Minnesota. But if Detroit loses this game and they're 13-3, if they beat Minnesota next week, they will have the tiebreaker because they already beat Minnesota once. So if they beat Minnesota next week, they'll have beaten Minnesota twice. So they will have the tiebreaker. So they'll pull back into a tie with Minnesota and have the tiebreaker. So they will overtake Minnesota. So Detroit actually does not need to win this game. So the 1 seed and the NFC North division both completely come down to Detroit beating Minnesota next week. So you might say, well, that means it's a terrible spot, right? For Detroit, it means you want to come in and take San Francisco. I mean, if you force me to lean in this game, I would lean to taking the points of San Francisco because of that reason, because Detroit does have that slightly questionable motivation there. But there are 2 reasons why I'm not going to come in and put my money on this. And one is Dan Campbell. And Dan Campbell, he is known for playing his starters and just going all out in every one of these games, which is part of the reason why a bunch of his guys have gotten hurt in blowout wins, which is stupid. But on the other hand, you got to kind of hand it to him because he really wants to win games and he just doesn't give a shit. He wants to play his starters. He's saying he's going to play his starters regardless of what had happened in that Green Bay, Minnesota game. He's saying, nope, we're going to show up and we're going to play all our starters here anyway. I don't care. So we'll see if that's the case or not. But it is Dan Campbell. So at the very least, I'm expecting the starters to be out there for the first half for Detroit at the very least. But again, you don't want to get your players injured when you have the game that means everything is up next, man. And you have the playoffs after that. So, man, I mean, if Campbell is smart, I mean, he is going to start probably resting his guys in the second half here. So you might see that be the case. But then the other motivating factor for Detroit is that this is playoff revenge from last year, man, because who's the team that knocked them out of the playoffs last year in the NFC Conference Championship? Well, it was the San Francisco 49ers, and it was in this stadium. Detroit had a 24-7 lead on them as a big underdog. Detroit looked like they might pull off the upset and get to the Super Bowl, which would have been a huge deal for this Detroit program that I think maybe has never even been to a Super Bowl. That would have been absolutely huge for them. They wound up not being able to win the game. So Detroit, I mean, if they didn't have this Minnesota game up next that really, really mattered, I think Detroit would really want to show up in this game and get that revenge because I think they do really want it. They want to beat that team that knocked them out last year, San Francisco, especially at the scene of the crime. But the problem, again, that I have with it is the Minnesota game upcoming means everything, man. So that means more than the playoff revenge does. I mean, playoff revenge would be nice, but again, it has me leaning to San Francisco a little bit here, man, because I think Detroit's motivation can be a bit questioned in this game. So that's the way that I look slightly to this taking the points of San Francisco, and the public's not going to want anything to do with it, with how bad they've been playing. But again, if San Francisco is going to show up at all, it's going to be at home on Monday night, man, against the best team one of the best teams in the league. So that's the way I look at it. And San Francisco just, they have the opportunity to at least try to beat them on a national stage and at least give their fans something to end the season with. So that's how I look at it. And then it is also a Pacific Coast game for a Detroit team that plays, what are they? Are they Eastern time zone or Central time zone? I forget. But a lot of times these teams that are in like the Eastern, like the more easterly time zones, having to go out to the Pacific time zone to play a late night game, it tends to not be as good like for their biological clock, man, because the game's not going to end until like 11 or midnight their time or whatever. So you know what I mean? Or it's not going to end until like 10 or 11 their time, depending on what time zone they're actually used to. So it does mess with your biological clock a little bit too. So we'll see if that is a factor at all. But I would actually slightly have to lean to the 49ers in this game, even though I do believe Dan Campbell when he says, nope, I'm playing all my starters. But again, don't be stupid, man. So at some point, I think he's not going to be stupid. And he knows this game doesn't actually matter. So I think that's why you've seen the line move a little bit back towards the 3. So I mean, if this was not Dan Campbell and it was not playoff revenge, I would actually probably come in and actually put my money on the 49ers and actually take the points here, but I'm not going to quite do it. That's going to do it for me, though. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Guys, thanks for hanging out, man. A long episode today for a Monday with not a whole lot of games going on here, but man, I like to talk. So thanks for dealing with me and for hanging out. Thanks everybody who was hanging out in the chat. My plays one more time are in college basketball: Kansas State +4, Colorado +10, NBA Golden State +4.5, Philadelphia -6, NHL Utah -130. Man, I mean, it's almost impossible that I get back on the winning side now with 2 days left. It is possible if I go 5-0 today. Or actually, if I go 4-1 today, there'll be like a slight possibility that it happens. So I don't think it's going to happen, though. But we will see. I mean, I got completely screwed over last night in those games, man. What can you do? It may be my second losing year ever in 18 years of doing this. And if that happens, we'll bounce back in the new year and maybe I'll have to try to change some things, man. But I mean, what I do has worked for so long that I don't really want to change what works, but maybe I got to be a little bit more selective. We'll see what happens, man. But this is just the way that I've done it for forever, basically. And I've learned from some of the best. So we'll see. That's going to do it, man. Thanks for hanging out. Peace out. I'm Tower Gang Toad. You can follow me on Twitter, patreon.com/Tower Gang. You can support Tower Gang, get bonus content, live pre-show, live post-show. You get Patreon-specific Spotify feed. You get to hang out with us in a Telegram, submit to the mailbag, all that good stuff. That's going to do it, man. Let's have a good Monday. Let's enjoy the rest of the holiday break here, at least the one that I'm on here, and roll into the new year well, man. Peace out, guys.